Greyridge. A name that might not ring a bell for many, but for those who lived there it was a sanctuary. A town like any other, yet unique in its own way. Nestled amidst rolling hills, it exuded a peaceful charm that seemed almost timeless. Life went by at its own leisurely pace, unhurried and unbothered by the chaos of the outside world. The air was always filled with the scent of pine and freshly cut grass, a fragrance that became synonymous with home. The laughter of children playing in the park was a familiar melody, a soundtrack to the town's daily life. Nothing extraordinary ever happened in Greyridge. It was a place where the extraordinary was the ordinary, or so they thought. Beneath the serene skies and tranquil days, something was stirring. Miranda Cole, a former neurologist turned schoolteacher, loved the tranquility of Greyridge. She sought solace from her troubled past in its peaceful rhythm, finding comfort in the predictable routine. Lyle, the quiet sound technician at the local theatre, found comfort in the familiar echoes of the auditorium. The theatre was his sanctuary, a place where he could lose himself in the art of sound. June Harker, the blind poet, treasured the town's soundscape. Her world was painted in the hues of birdsong and rustling leaves, each sound a brushstroke on the canvas of her imagination. Little did they know this serenity was about to be shattered. The calm was merely a prelude to the storm. An invisible storm was brewing, ready to unleash chaos upon their senses. The tranquility of Greyridge was about to be tested in ways they could never have imagined. It began subtly, almost imperceptibly at first, a strange taste when Miranda looked at the color red. It was as if the very sight of it triggered a reaction deep within her, a bitter tang that she couldn't quite place. For Lyle, it was a faint melody that accompanied the aroma of coffee, a tune that seemed to dance just out of reach, teasing his senses every morning. June, usually attuned to the rhythm of the town, felt a dissonance, an unfamiliar vibration in the air. It was as if the very heartbeat of the town had shifted, leaving her feeling unsteady. They dismissed these occurrences as mere anomalies, tricks of the mind, transient glitches in their senses. After all, everyone experiences odd moments now and then, right? But these glitches soon morphed into monstrous distortions, weaving their way into the fabric of their lives. The once familiar became foreign, and the ordinary turned sinister. The colors in Miranda's classroom began to hum, a low, persistent drone that pricked at her nerves. It was as if the walls themselves were alive, whispering secrets she couldn't understand. Lyle's world transformed into a cacophony as everyday sounds morphed into an unbearable orchestra of screeching violins and clanging cymbals. The once soothing sounds of life now felt like an assault on his senses. June, her world of darkness now pierced by phantom lights, felt an icy dread creep into her heart. The lights flickered and danced, casting eerie shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. The townsfolk, once oblivious, started noticing the changes too. Their once peaceful town now felt like a place of unease and uncertainty. Whispers of fear and confusion replaced the familiar greetings. The air was thick with tension, and the sense of community began to fray at the edges. Days turned into a terrifying sensory carnival. The once comforting aroma of Mrs. Gable's apple pie now brought forth the taste of bitter almonds. The vibrant hues of the sunset echoed with the deafening roar of 1,000 drums. The gentle touch of a loved one was now a kaleidoscope of colors, beautiful and terrifying all at once. The very essence of their senses became a source of fear and confusion. Greyridge, once a sanctuary, had become a prison of their own perceptions. Fear hung heavy in the air, as thick and suffocating as the summer humidity. The townsfolk, their senses haywire, retreated into themselves, afraid of the world they could no longer understand. Children, with their untamed senses, were affected the most. The vibrant colors of crayons on paper shrieked like tortured souls, sending chills down their spines. The innocent laughter of their friends echoed with the metallic tang of blood. Their world, once filled with wonder, became a nightmare they couldn't wake up from. Little Timmy Harper, known for his infectious laughter, now sat in a corner, his eyes wide with terror, his ears covered tightly, as if trying to shut out the terrifying symphony only he could hear. The sight of him, and countless other children like him, sent a wave of panic through the town. Something was terribly wrong. They needed answers. They needed help. The parasite within. June, with her heightened senses, was the first to understand. She had always been more attuned to the world around her, feeling things others couldn't. Her blindness had sharpened her other senses to an extraordinary degree. It wasn't just a random affliction. The symptoms were too specific, too targeted. People were losing their sense of reality, their grip on what was real and what was imagined. There was an external force at play, something sinister lurking beneath the surface. It was as if the town itself was under siege by an invisible enemy. It was as if an invisible parasite had invaded their town, their minds twisting their perceptions, feeding off their terror. The more fear it generated, the stronger it became. She could feel it, a subtle vibration in the air, a discordant hum that resonated with their fear. It was a presence that was almost tangible, yet completely unseen. It fed on their heightened senses, their fear, their confusion. The more they tried to understand it, the more it eluded them, slipping through their grasp like smoke. The more they felt, the stronger it grew. It thrived on their emotions, their anxieties, and their deepest fears. She shared her horrifying revelation with Miranda and Lyle, the only ones who would believe her. They were skeptical at first, but the evidence was undeniable. They had to find a way to fight back, to sever the parasitic hold on their town. It was a daunting task, but they knew they couldn't do it alone. Their survival depended on it. United by a common goal, they prepared to face the unseen enemy, determined to reclaim their town and their sanity. Miranda's descent. Miranda, her medical knowledge failing her, felt herself slipping into the abyss of madness. Her once keen mind was now a whirlwind of distorted perceptions. Her eyes, once warm and inviting, turned cold and distant, their colour shifting with every terrifying sensation that washed over her. The once comforting routine of her life was now a chaotic jumble of terrifying experiences. She began to write on the walls of her classroom, her fingers leaving trails of blood as ink. Strange symbols and equations born from the chaos of her senses covered the blackboard. Miranda, the beacon of logic and reason in their midst, had become a terrifying example of the havoc the parasite could wreak. Sensory overload. As the situation in Greyridge spiraled out of control, the streets, once bustling with life, were now desolate, echoing with the phantom cries of its inhabitants. The vibrant tapestry of life had unraveled, leaving behind a canvas of fear and despair. The townsfolk, overwhelmed by the sensory overload, succumbed to madness. Their minds, unable to cope with the constant barrage of distorted perceptions, fractured. The line between reality and the terrifying hallucinations induced by the parasite blurred. Greyridge had become a ghost town, haunted by the living. A drastic measure. Desperate times called for drastic measures. June, her intuition sharper than ever, realized the only way to fight the parasite was to cut off its food source, their senses. They had to embrace sensory deprivation. It was a risky gamble, fraught with uncertainty, but it was their only hope. Lyle, his knowledge of sound their weapon, constructed makeshift devices to block the auditory onslaught. Miranda, in a rare moment of clarity, used her medical expertise to create a potent sedative, a temporary reprieve from the sensory maelstrom. They distributed these tools among the remaining townsfolk, guiding them towards a world of enforced silence and darkness. A fragile peace. The days that followed were a blur. The town held its breath, shrouded in an eerie silence. The parasite, starved of its sustenance, weakened. The cacophony of distorted senses slowly subsided, leaving behind a deafening silence. Greyridge was a town reborn, but the scars ran deep. The threat wasn't entirely gone. It lurked in the shadows, waiting for an opportunity to resurface. Their sensory deprivation couldn't last forever. They had bought some time, but the question remained. Could they find a permanent solution before the parasite returned, stronger than ever? For now, the future of Greyridge hangs in the balance, a fragile peace maintained by the silence of their senses. But Miranda knows the truth. It's not over, it's just waiting for us to feel again.